faked a DNA test to prove the kid is his. A few days later, he came back with a real test.
Hello, Redditors, a longtime user and fan of this platform, but I've never really had a need to come on here. I am coming on here now because I desperately need advice. I just got kicked out of the house by my husband after he found out that the chat wasn't his. It was a one-time mistake, and I really didn't know how to remedy it. I know you're probably wondering what happened, so let me give you some backstory first. My name is Felicia, and I am a 30-year-old woman. I have been married to my husband, Robin, who is a 32-year-old man for 5 years now. Robin and I met on a dating site. He was very charming, and I instantly got attracted. We dated for a few years before deciding to get married. It was a whirlwind romance, but I never felt that it went too fast. Robin is the exact opposite of me. He is handsome, charming, and ambitious. He has a magnetic personality that draws people towards him effortlessly. He is a successful architect, while I, on the other hand, am a complex character. I am intelligent and warm, but I have insecurities and vulnerabilities, and I am not as popular or as charming as Robin. I was cautious about trying online dating, not knowing what to expect. But Robin's profile caught my eye right away. He seemed really friendly and confident. Our chats were easy, and I felt like we clicked, even through the screen. When we finally met in person, I was drawn to Robin's outgoing personality. He made me feel special, like I was the center of his attention. But deep down, I could tell he had his own insecurities too, which made me feel closer to him. Our relationship just felt right from the start. We enjoyed simple things together, like stealing glances across the room or having heart-to-heart talks. But sometimes I worried that I wasn't as outgoing or impressive as Robin. Despite my doubts, I knew we had something special. I admired Robin's drive and ambition, and he appreciated me for who I was, flaws included. Together, we faced life's challenges with love and support. From the moment we started dating, it was clear that Robin was on a successful path. As an architect, he brought in a steady income, while I pursued my passion as an artist, which unfortunately didn't bring in much money. Robin didn't mind covering the bills. He was just glad to see me doing what I loved. However, his demanding job meant he was often away, leaving me feeling isolated and alone. Despite his best efforts, the loneliness crept in, casting a shadow over our otherwise happy relationship. Having a heart-to-heart with Robin about feeling lonely was tough. He was doing his best juggling work and our relationship, but with him being the main breadwinner, his job kept him away a lot. One night, when Robin was out again for the weekend and I was feeling really low, I ended up at a bar alone. That's where I met John. We hit it off right away, and with a few drinks in me, things got out of hand and we had sex. The next morning, regret hit me hard, and I promised myself never to drink like that again. The idea of coming clean to Robin scared me. I was terrified of hurting him or messing up what we had. So I kept it to myself, hoping I could bury the guilt and move on. I loved Robin too much to lose him, and I knew I would lose him if I ever came clean. The fear of losing Robin was overwhelming, and the thought of confessing filled me with dread. I cherished him deeply and couldn't bear the idea of him walking away because of my mistake. So I made a decision to keep my indiscretion a secret, locking it away deep within me. When John expressed interest in seeing each other again, I shut him down immediately. I made it clear that what happened was a mistake, fueled by alcohol and loneliness, and that I was committed to my relationship with Robin. I hoped that by distancing myself from John, I could bury the memory of that night and move forward. Months passed, and just as life seemed to settle back into a semblance of normalcy, I discovered I was pregnant. I was absolutely horrified when I found out I was pregnant. It felt like my world was crumbling around me. I had been so consumed with the fear of Robin finding out about my infidelity that I completely forgot to take my birth control pill. Deep down, I knew the baby was likely John's, but admitting that to Robin was out of the question. I loved him too much to risk losing him, so I made the gut-wrenching decision to lie and tell him the baby was his. To my surprise, Robin was over the moon when I shared the news with him. His joy was infectious, and he wasted no time in proposing to me. In just a few months, we were married. Despite the whirlwind of happiness surrounding our wedding, guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. I knew I was deceiving Robin, but I convinced myself that it was for the greater good. After all, Telling him the truth would have shattered our happiness and torn our family apart. Our honeymoon was like a dream come true, with Robin sparing no expense to make it unforgettable. Despite the challenges of pregnancy, including morning sickness and hormonal swings, Robin was my rock, supporting me every step of the way. His excitement for the baby only intensified my guilt, knowing deep down that the child wasn't his. But the reality of our situation weighed heavily on me. Robin was not only the love of my life, but also my lifeline. He provided for us financially, and without him, I would struggle to make ends meet. The thought of losing him was unbearable, so I buried my guilt and focused on preserving our marriage. Meanwhile, John's attempts to reach out only added to my stress. Each time he tried to contact me, I shut him down, refusing to entertain the possibility of him being the father. I reassured myself that the lie was necessary to protect my marriage and our future as a family. Soon the baby came. He was so cute, and I am going to call him Felix for the sake of privacy. The first few months with Felix were a wild ride of joy and exhaustion. He was a healthy, adorable little guy, and everyone couldn't get enough of him. Robin was over the moon about having a son, and he stepped up big time to help me out. He even dialed back his work hours to be around more, which made all the difference. With Robin's help and support from our families, we got through those tough early days. But as Felix started growing up a bit, I started feeling a bit restless. Don't get me wrong, being a stay-at-home mom was great, but I needed something more. The days at home were starting to blend together, and I missed the challenge of work. So I decided I'd go back to work once Felix was a bit older, maybe around 2 or 3 years old. It wasn't an easy choice, but I knew it was the right one for me. Plus, a break from diapers and baby talk sounded pretty good right about then. Things were great for a while, however. As Felix grew, it became clear to everyone that he didn't quite resemble Robin. The whispers started when he was around a year old, and by the time he was a little over a year, it was hard to ignore. I couldn't shake off the worry that had plagued me during pregnancy. Deep down, I'd prayed that Felix wouldn't take after John in looks. I knew there was no chance he'd look like Robin, but I hoped he'd take after me enough to throw people off the scent. Unfortunately, Felix ended up resembling me a lot, but with a strong resemblance to John, too. It didn't take long for everyone to notice the stark contrast between Felix and Robin. Felix's red hair stuck out like a sore thumb against the backdrop of Robin's blonde locks and my own black hair. It was a real head-scratcher for everyone, including me. I didn't really get how genetics worked, but I was crossing my fingers that Felix would end up with hair like mine or Robin's. But fate had other plans, and Felix ended up with fiery red hair, just like John. As Felix got older, his red hair became the talk of the town, sparking questions about where he got it from. I was relieved when Robin didn't seem bothered by Felix's red hair. He reassured me, saying he knew Felix was his son, no matter the color of his hair. Robin even mentioned that his grandma had red hair, suggesting that might be where Felix got it from. His understanding and acceptance eased some of the worry I had been carrying then. It meant the world to me how Robin always had my back whenever Felix's appearance was questioned. One particular instance stands out, when a cousin of Robin's, who was visiting, couldn't help but comment on Felix's red hair. Instead of letting it become an awkward moment, Robin smoothly stepped in and explained that Felix probably inherited his red hair from their grandma. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders as Robin defended me and diffused the situation with ease. What struck me most was how the cousin responded. Instead of dwelling on the differences, they praised genetics for its mysterious ways, highlighting how it could uncover hidden traits and bring surprises into the world. It was a reminder that sometimes what makes us unique is also what makes life beautiful. As Felix turned 2, I found myself considering a return to work. I didn't want anything too stressful, but rather something flexible that would still allow me plenty of time with Felix. Remote work wasn't appealing since I was itching to get out of the house. I started browsing job listings, but I wasn't in any rush. Robin, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled about the idea of me going back to work. With his income now higher than before, he didn't see the need for me to work outside the home. I sat down with Robin and laid it all out, explaining why I felt the need to go back to work. Unlike him, I didn't have a wide circle of friends. Robin was the social butterfly, effortlessly charming everyone he met, while I was more of a lone wolf with few connections outside our family. With Felix to care for, my world had become even smaller, especially on days when Robin was away for work. The loneliness weighed heavy on me, and I missed him dearly. The four walls of our home started to feel suffocating, and I yearned for a change of scenery. There was nobody to invite me on girls' night out or to invite me outside for drinks. It was just me. And even though I enjoyed the loneliness, they were days, it felt suffocating. Going back to work wasn't just about earning money. It was about reclaiming a sense of independence and purpose outside the confines of our home. It was a way for me to break free from the isolation and monotony and to feel like I was contributing something meaningful to the world beyond our family and feeling like I was more than just a mom. Robin agreed with me and even apologized for the loneliness I had been feeling. He said he felt genuinely sorry and assured me he was doing his best. I told him there was no need to apologize because, truth be told, I felt sorry too. Robin was putting in long hours at work to provide for us, and he was doing an excellent job of it. After Felix was born, we upgraded to a bigger house with a home theater and a swimming pool. However stupid, John just wouldn't leave me alone. It was frustrating, to say the least. He had been persistent in trying to meet up, and I decided to entertain him this time just to put an end to it for good. Instead of blocking him as I usually did, I responded to his text. We agreed to meet outside of town to avoid being recognized. When we met, I made it clear to John that there was no way Felix could be his child. I explained that Felix was Robin's and that I had taken the morning after pill after that night. John tried to defend himself by pointing out Felix's red hair, claiming it was like his. I warned him that I would involve the police if he continued to harass us. I asked if he had been stalking us, but he denied it, saying he had only seen us at places like the store or the park. I reminded him that red hair ran in Robin's family, making it clear once and for all that Felix wasn't his child. I told him to stop worrying me and explained the situation thoroughly so he wouldn't bother me again. I even mentioned that I had done a DNA test, which finally convinced him to drop it. John apologized for bothering me and assured me he didn't mean to come off as creepy. He was just curious, and if Felix had been his child, he would have wanted a place in their life. I reiterated that Felix wasn't his child and that he shouldn't worry me any further. Then I left. With Felix at his grandparents' and Robin heading to work, it was just me at home. I understood Robin's stress, especially dealing with demanding clients at work. When he suggested I take a break and go out the next day while he stayed home with Felix, I was thrilled. It was rare for Robin to have a free day, and even rarer for him to insist I take time for myself. Since I didn't have many friends to hang out with, most days it was just me and Felix at home, so the prospect of having a day to myself was incredibly exciting. The next day, Robin handed me his credit card and encouraged me to treat myself to some pampering. He planned to take Felix to the park for some quality father-son time. I seized the opportunity and indulged in a day of self-care. I treated myself to a spa session, got my nails done, and even refreshed my hair. It felt like a luxury to have some time just for me, and I savored every moment of it. Returning home, Felix was in high spirits, and he excitedly babbled about his day with Robin at the park, and Robin told me about how he had enjoyed pizza. We spent some time watching TV together, had dinner, and then settled down for bed. However, over the next few days, I noticed Robin's irritability creeping back in. I attributed it to his usual work stress and didn't think much of it at first. As Robin's irritability worsened, he began directing it towards me, which was deeply unsettling. His behavior worsened to the point where he wouldn't interact with Felix much. Communication became strained, with Robin shutting down and refusing to engage in conversation. Despite my attempts to address the issue, Robin insisted that everything was fine and attributed his behavior to work-related stress. This pattern continued for several days, leaving me feeling increasingly concerned and isolated. Despite my attempts to address the issue, Robin insisted that everything was fine and attributed his behavior to work-related stress. This pattern continued for several days, leaving me feeling increasingly concerned and isolated. Feeling concerned about Robin's behavior, I decided to seek help from his parents, who were always understanding and supportive. After discussing it with Robin, we agreed that I would visit them in a few days' time. Robin was fine with the plan, and Robin even encouraged us to go, wanting a day to himself. The next day, Felix and I got ready and headed to his parents' house. It was a pleasant visit, filled with warm conversation and reassurances that Robin's behavior was likely just work-related stress. Felix enjoyed playing there, and his grandparents showered him with affection. After spending several hours there, I realized it was getting late and decided to head home to prepare dinner. However, when I arrived, I was shocked to find not only my belongings on the porch, but also Felix's belongings, indicating that something was seriously wrong. Feeling bewildered and scared, I stood frozen as I stared at my and Felix's belongings strewn on the porch. Why had Robin thrown them out? My heart was racing with confusion and anxiety as I desperately tried calling him, but he refused to answer. Resorting to banging on the door, I hoped my neighbors wouldn't call the cops for the noise. After what felt like an eternity, Robin cracked the door open just enough to peek out and ask what I wanted. I was taken aback. What did he mean? I just wanted to come inside. I had returned from his parents' place feeling stressed, and Felix was tired and needed to sleep. The situation made no sense, and I couldn't understand why Robin was acting this way. However, I soon found out why he was acting this way. Robin looked me dead in the eye and told me he knew Felix wasn't his child. When Robin stared me down and said those words, it felt like my whole world collapsed. I wished I could just vanish into thin air. At first, I nervously chuckled, thinking he was pulling my leg, but his expression told me he was dead serious. He dropped the bombshell that he'd done a DNA test, proving Felix wasn't his biological child. It felt like a punch to the gut. Robin's calm voice contrasted with the fire burning in his eyes as he accused me of betraying him, of trying to pass off another guy's kid as his own. His words hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me stunned and overwhelmed with guilt. I stood there. I was unable to find the right words, as Robin made it clear he never wanted to see me again. Standing there, still reeling from Robin's accusation, I watched as he walked back inside and closed the door. It felt like a punch to the gut, and I went through a whirlwind of emotions right then and there. I could feel the eyes of our nosy neighbors on me, but I didn't want to make a scene or become the talk of the town. I wanted to cry, scream, and beg all at once. But I knew there was no point in begging Robin for forgiveness. He was too stubborn, and I didn't want to subject myself to more humiliation. So I called an Uber to take me and Felix to my parents' house. Packing our things quickly, I left behind the home we had shared and headed for the comfort of my childhood home. Here I am, stuck in my room, feeling utterly defeated. I've been crying my eyes out for what seems like forever. Leaving Robin's place was tough, but now I'm completely falling apart. My folks are mad, of course, but there's not much they can do. They're talking about staging some kind of intervention, hoping to convince Robin to give me another chance. It sounds like a long shot, and honestly, I'm not sure if it'll make any difference. I can't shake this feeling of guilt and dread, knowing I've messed everything up. All I can do now is wait and hope for the best. It's tough right now because my parents are the only ones in my corner, willing to lend a hand. Earlier, I tried reaching out to Robin's parents, hoping they'd offer some support, but that backfired. They picked up the phone, only to give me an earful, making it crystal clear they were onto me. Their anger cut deep, especially since I genuinely cared for them. They'd always been so kind to me, and now I'd gone and betrayed their trust. The guilt weighs heavy on me, knowing I've let them down in such a big way. It's a painful realization that's hard to shake off. Another blow that hit me hard was discovering that Robin had emptied our joint account before I even reached my parents' place. Our joint account was our lifeline, where Robin would deposit money for bills, expenses, and my own needs, since I'm not working much as a stay-at-home mom. It was a major source of financial support for me. But to my shock and dismay, when I checked the account, it was drained completely. Every cent gone. It left me stranded, and I had to rely on my parents to even cover the cost of the Uber ride. It was a painful reminder of just how much damage had been done to our relationship. I honestly don't think Robin will ever forgive, but I can only hope. I need help in the form of advice or suggestions on how to approach Robin. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? Thanks for listening, though. Update. Hi, everyone. I know it's been a while since I last posted, and I honestly didn't expect to be back here. But seeing how much attention my last post received, I feel compelled to share another update with you all. A lot has happened in the past month, and I want to fill you in on the details. First of all, I want to share that Robin and I are sadly getting a divorce. As I mentioned earlier, my parents had promised to stage an intervention to help me mend things with Robin. We tried reaching out to him multiple times, but he refused to pick up, even when we called from a private number. So we decided to take matters into our own hands and headed over to his house, hoping to speak with him face to face. When we arrived at the house, to my relief, Robin was home. Despite the tension between us, he still had a soft spot for my parents because of how kind they had always been to him. So he graciously welcomed us inside, although he did shoot me a disapproving look. Nonetheless, he greeted my parents and my brother warmly and even offered them drinks. I was shocked to hear that. Robin wasn't supposed to know John. He must have noticed my surprise because he went on to explain. John had actually approached him before, claiming that he and I had sex and that he thought Felix was his. At first, Robin didn't believe him, knowing I usually stayed home. But John kept insisting that Felix was his child. As Robin started seeing similarities between John and Felix, he began to wonder if there was any truth to it. That's when he decided to do a DNA test to prove John wrong. I was speechless. There was no defense I could offer. Seeing that Robin wouldn't change his mind, my parents decided it was best to leave. Before we departed, Robin made it clear that divorce papers would be coming my way soon, and he wouldn't be paying child support. He even threatened to sue for paternal fraud to avoid it. I broke down, crying and pleading, but Robin remained unmoved. Eventually, my parents had to physically pull me away from Robin's house. They reminded me that I had brought this upon myself. This is everything that's happened. I'm still at my parents' place, and even though Felix senses something's off, he's too young to fully grasp it. Honestly, I blame John for everything. I'll never forgive him, and he won't ever have a say in Felix's life, no matter what. Thanks to everyone for their support. I just hope others don't make the same mistake I did. Feeling defeated doesn't even begin to describe it. How did I go from a life with luxuries like a home theater and a swimming pool back to my parents' house? Robin had gotten me used to that lifestyle, and now I'm back to square one. Getting back into the workforce after such a long break won't be easy. Thanks for listening, though. I guess it was nice while it lasted. Like my parents said, I brought this on myself. I am here to confess my mistake, and I am now learning my lesson. And I have learned that cheating can never lead to something good. I was letting my affair partner come over to my house after my husband left for work, and at the end of the day, my affair partner started stealing from me and also tried to set up his sister with my husband. I cannot believe that my affair partner will secretly set up his sister with my husband and make her take my place. And now my husband and I are about to get a divorce. That is because he is accusing me of stealing the valuable stuff in the house, and he is also seeing my affair partner's sister now. He also knows that I've been letting my affair partner into the house. My name is Martha, and I am a 26-year-old housewife. The name of my husband is Edward, and he is 45 years old. He is a businessman, and Edward and I got married because our families were very close and they thought we were the perfect couple. Edward took me out on a couple of dates before he had me to be his girlfriend. Our relationship grew, and a few months later, we got married. Edward didn't allow me to work because his family had thought that I couldn't have time for the house if I was working, and so that's how I became a housewife. I didn't have any particular work that I was doing at that time, so it was easy for me to follow his lead. His family was emphasizing on us having children early, but I didn't give it any thought because I wasn't ready. But since Edward was in his 40s, they thought it was time he had children. I was always alone in the house all by myself, and I got used to it. As time went on, I became bored staying at home, and I wanted some sort of entertainment. I found that entertainment in Drake. I ran into Drake at the farmer's market one day, and since then we have been seeing each other. Drake and I got to know each other so well. I found out that we had a lot in common. He was my escape from all the boredom I was feeling alone in the house. He was a very funny person. He always made me laugh anytime I was feeling bored. My husband was not always around. He was always on one business trip or the other. I actually got used to it, but as a young woman, I needed a man that was close to my age, who could understand what I wanted. I needed a young man, and Drake was the one. Drake took it upon himself to do everything for me. It was the little things that he did that made me fall for him. He could open the door for me. He could help me around the house. Overall, he was doing things that my husband was not doing for me. Edward was old, and moreover, he was always on a trip or the other. Few weeks after I met Drake, he took me out on a date. We bonded a lot, and we had a lot in common. Drake was a very attentive person. He noticed the little things. And most of all, he was my age, so he understood me well. Drake didn't tell me what he did for a living, and I never understood why. I should have known better that he was a scam. He always used to tell me he had problems with his credit card, and I mostly paid for what we usually ate. I never saw it as something bad until now. Drake and I continued seeing each other for some months, and since my husband was not always around, he didn't notice, and I was happy about it because I saw something that was keeping me busy after a long time. I was always inviting Drake over to my house for us to spend quality time together. I never liked being seen in public because my husband knew a lot of people and I was afraid I could run into them. And so I avoided public places and settled for my house. In my house, Drake and I were trying new things. He taught me how to dance. I have always wanted to dance. He taught me a lot about his likes and dislikes. Drake could come over and I could prepare food for him. We could watch movies, have fun, and be happy. It went on for a while, and by that time, Drake and I started dating. We dated for a while, and he introduced me to his sister, Dora. Dora was very nice to me, and I liked her. I thought Dora was so much like me, but more bold. She could do anything she wanted, and I was jealous. Dora took me out shopping a couple of times, and she got me clothes that, according to her, I should be wearing. She boosted my self-confidence because I thought I didn't have a good body. But I didn't know all this had been done in order for me to warm up to them and for them to exploit me. They often come over to my house sometimes, and we do a lot of fun activities together. We played games and watched movies together. I often cuddle up with Drake, and Dora could always say we were such a cute couple. I could always blush because I had her approval, and it meant a lot to me. I didn't know that whenever Drake came over to my place, he was stealing something from my home. Drake was secretly doing things behind my back, and I was not aware. My husband got back from one of his numerous trips one day, and I was in the kitchen preparing food for him when he called for me. I was thinking it was just one of those days where he didn't know where he kept his watch. I went to meet him in the living room, and he told me he could not find the cash he dropped in his drawer. I told him I didn't see any money. Maybe he had spent it and he forgot. But he insisted he had dropped money there. I ended up convincing him he didn't drop any money there because if there was, I could have seen it. He ate his breakfast and promised to return early from work today, saying he was taking me out. I had plans with Drake and I had to cancel because anytime Edward was around, we don't usually see each other at all in order to avoid being caught. I did some house chores, and before I knew it, it was time for me to prepare for the dinner Edward was taking me to. I got dressed and we left. Edward always tried his best for me, and I always felt like it was never enough. Used to think that he didn't understand me because we weren't in the same age bracket. We ate dinner and he told me he was going to be around for the next couple of weeks. He had said that he had some time to spare before his next trip. I was very sad about it because I knew I was not going to see Drake for a long time. I faked being happy in order for him not to suspect that I wasn't happy. In the period that Edward was around, we visited our family members, mostly Edward's. He was very close to them. I didn't like them because anytime they saw me, they were always talking about me having children. Don't get me wrong, I wanted children, but not now. Edward was always on work trips, and I didn't want to raise children all by myself. But they didn't understand that, so I normally stayed far away from them. I was only close to Edward's mother, Edna. Edna was like a mother to me. She was part of the reason why I got married to Edward. She has these motherly hugs and care she usually gives me. It makes me feel at home, and she usually makes food and sends them to me once in a while. Whenever I needed someone to talk to, she was there. Edna was a blessing to me because I felt like she even liked me more than her own son. Whenever Edward and I had problems, she could be on my side, and I always appreciated her for it. Edward didn't stay for long before he was called for a trip and he left. I was very happy the morning he left, and I went straight to call Drake to come over. Drake and I had a good time. I even went on a spa date with Dora. We went to the beach. I was back to being fully happy again. There were days that I drank and slept over at my house. We decided to leave for a weekend getaway a few days after Edward left. We went to a town where nobody knew us, and so we were free to do whatever. We got back home, and it was not long when Edward came back from his trip. Once again, he discovered that things were missing in the house which I didn't notice. I also discovered that my set of jewelries were also missing, but I didn't know how to explain it to Edward. He accused me of stealing from him. I was shocked because he was accusing me of something I didn't do. I could steal from my own house again. It went on for a while, and it was becoming too much. I spoke to Drake about it so that he could help me find solutions to the problem and how we could get who was stealing from us. He told me that I shouldn't drop my keys under the doormat again, and that I should be giving it to him in order for him to keep things safe in the house. I didn't know I was giving the key to my house to the thief himself. Whenever my husband was around, Dora could come over and we could talk sometimes. We did things together, and I didn't know that she had eyes for my husband. She could come over with clothes that were too revealing, and I never saw it as anything for a day. Looking back on it, I wished I had said something to her or stopped her from coming to the house. She could move around in front of my husband, serve him food, and do things for him. I thought she was just caring. Unknown to me that she had already made plans with her brother in order for them to snatch my husband away from me because they thought he had money, and I was in their way of getting it. Drake and Dora hatched their plan well, and I let them into my house. Dora got close to my husband, and I didn't know until it was too late. At that point, Dora was already seeing my husband secretly. He was giving her money and buying her gifts, things he didn't buy for me. He took her on different trips, and I didn't know. Unknown to me, I was still in a relationship with her brother. Drake and I continued to see each other, and whenever I was with Drake, Dora was with my husband. It went on for a while. Whenever my husband comes back from those trips, he was always angry with me for doing one thing or the other. We usually fight a lot since he started seeing Dora. I didn't know that Dora was instigating my husband against me. Drake could steal things from my house, and my husband could blame me, saying I was the thief. I didn't know that my husband had taken my house problem to Dora to discuss. Dora had told him I was the one stealing those items and using the money for my personal benefits. My husband could come home and start saying all manner of things to me. I was very confused, and there were days I could cry myself to sleep. After some time, the stealing stopped, and I didn't know it stopped because Edward was around and I was not letting Drake into my house. Edward and I were not particularly on good terms. We went about our normal lives for some time, and I found out that Edward had changed in a lot of ways. He was not paying attention to me like usual. I knew we weren't that cuddly couple, but I knew something wasn't right. He went out at night and stayed up late. He comes back home drunk, and sometimes he doesn't come at all. He made late-night calls, and that got me really worried. I decided to follow him one day in order for me to find out what was going on. I saw him entering a restaurant with a woman, but when I confronted him about it, he told me it was just a business partner he took to lunch to thank her for work. And I didn't believe him because I knew Edward, he didn't know how to lie. I talked to Drake and Dora about what was going on with Edward, and they told me to not think too much into it, that it might just be nothing. They made me believe something was wrong with me, and I should stop thinking about what wasn't there. Unknown to me, they were the ones doing everything. My relationship with Drake continued, and I always felt at peace with him. And I was thinking we should move to the next stage because I saw him as a genuine person who loved me. But every time I brought it up, he could find something to say that it wasn't the right time, and that when the time was right, it could happen. I believed him because I thought he needed time. But I was wrong. Few days after Drake left my house came back and started complaining again. But this time I was tired, and I decided to install cameras in my house without anyone knowing. I didn't tell Drake because I knew he could talk me out of it. So I installed cameras and waited for who was stealing from me to strike again. The first day, I didn't see anything, and I kept waiting, but no one suspicious came into the house. It took time for me to discover that Drake was the one stealing from me. I caught Drake on the camera taking something from my husband's drawer and putting it in his pocket. I didn't want to believe it. I felt used. I started crying because I allowed a thief into my house and I thought he was a saint. I even went to him with my problems in order for him to help me. Unknown to me that my enemies were very close. I never for once suspected that it was Drake that was stealing from me. I didn't know how I was going to explain to my husband that it was my affair that was stealing from us all this while. How was I going to explain it? After a few days of ignoring Drake's call, I finally made up my mind to speak to him. I decided was not to allow a thief into my house again. I met up with him at a cafe. I showed him the video and he didn't deny it. I was very surprised. I threatened to report him to the police for stealing from me, but he said if I did, he was going to expose me to my husband, and I didn't want that. Drake wasn't the man I met a few months back. He had totally changed the man I spent a lot of my time with, and couldn't have threatened me that way. He said he had videos he was going to send to my husband if I didn't let him go. I cried out of the cafe and I never looked back. I got home and I saw a message from Drake threatening me to do exactly what he wanted. He extorted me a great deal. He asked me to take money from my husband, which I did. I was seriously blackmailed by the person I thought was my supposed affair. I gave Drake a lot of money, and countless times I had explained to him that it could be a problem if my husband found out, but he didn't listen to me. After countless extortions from Drake, my husband finally found out that his money was missing. He called me and asked him what I had been doing with the huge amount of money I was taking. I didn't know how to explain to him that I was being blackmailed by the man I had an affair with, because I knew it would end my marriage. Since I didn't have a good explanation for the money, my husband decided to report to our family members that I was a thief and that I had been stealing from the house. I had to explain to them that I used the money to buy some personal stuff, so I was able to buy myself some time. They didn't ask me further, and I was glad. A few weeks later, I saw my husband with Dora in a restaurant holding hands intimately. It was then I became aware that it had been their plan to destroy my marriage. I couldn't go straight and confront them because I was also guilty, and if exposed, it could ruin my marriage. I met up with Dora to stop seeing my husband, but she refused. These people were out to destroy me, and I was the one that bought them. I discovered that all along it was Dora that my husband had been seeing secretly. I should have known better. It all made sense now. A few days later, I was doing everything within my power to keep things away from my husband. But since he was with Dora, I was always afraid he was going to find out one way or the other. Drake didn't leave me alone. He kept on taking money from me, and I didn't know what to do. They claimed they had a video of me and Drake together, and they threatened to show my husband. At some point, I had to stop giving Drake money. My husband had cleared out the money that was in the account. I became helpless, and Drake kept on blackmailing me. But at that point, I was tired, and I didn't have any more money to give again. I began selling out all the valuable things I had, but it wasn't enough. Dora finally exposed me to my husband after I refused to give them money. My husband was very angry at me. He found out that I was cheating on him with someone. I had to explain to him that I was set up by these people, but he didn't believe me because Dora had already fed him with enough lies about me. I kept begging Edward to listen to me that I was set up, but he didn't hear me. My husband kept on talking about what I did, but he was still the one in a relationship with Dora. I didn't see the difference, but then again, I was fooled by them. So I knew he was also being fooled, and I tried to open his eyes to see the reality, but I wasn't heard. My husband asked me to pack out of the house because I cheated on him, and at that point everything came crashing down on me. I was going to be homeless, I didn't have money, and I had sold my valuables to get money for Drake. I didn't know where to go. I got to my mother's old house hoping that Edward had a change of heart somehow, but it never happened. I went to his parents' house in order for them to speak to Edward to forgive me. But they turned me away, calling me all sorts of names and how I was a thief who had been stealing and cheating on their son. A few days later, I was given divorce papers that were already signed by Edward. I cried my eyes out because I had lost something good I had. I lost my marriage. I was looking for something that wasn't going to last. Now I have lost my husband to Dora and Drake. I shouldn't have cheated on Edward. He was everything a woman should want, but I was being greedy instead of me. To make my marriage work, I went after someone who was finally my downfall. Update. Hello guys, so right now my husband and I finalized the divorce. He made sure to painfully drag things out. He left me without a penny. I was fine with that because honestly, it was never about the money with me. I tried to explain to him the kind of person Dora and her brother were, but he never listened. I regretted what I did back then. I shouldn't have cheated on my husband. I even brought my affair partner to my house, which was very wrong. I started working at a restaurant as a waitress now because what had happened taught me a lesson that I needed to have my own money. And most importantly, I am depending on myself now. It wasn't easy, but I was trying my best. A few weeks ago, I heard that Dora and Drake ran away with money belonging to Edward. I felt pity for him only because I was human. I did warn him about them, but he didn't listen. He always said I was jealous. Right now, I made some friends who were showing me to the right path in life, and I am so happy to have them. I am always glad anytime I remember that I never gave in to the pressure of having children with Edward, because it could have been so much more complicated with children. A few days back, I went to Edward's place to check up on him, because I also heard he was in a very bad place. And when I got there, he chased me out, blaming me for being the reason for his problems. I understood where he was coming from. I was the one that brought Dora and Drake into our family, and they destroyed us beyond repair. Looking back, I know I disappointed a lot of people, especially Edna, Edward's mother. When she found out, she was very devastated. I couldn't look her in the face anymore. She was everything one could want in a mother, and the fact that she took me as her daughter and I did this to her makes what I did 1,000,000 times worse. Right now, she isn't talking to me and I can't even reach her anymore. She has distanced herself from me ever since. I shouldn't have cheated. I regret what I did because I hurt the people who I loved and also the people who loved me. The relationship I thought was gold and I was running after turned out to be dust. Drake never liked me. He carefully planned to milk me of my husband's money. He never loved me. Dora was just like her brother. She wasn't genuine like I thought. Everything they did, said to me was calculated, and I was a fool for falling into their trap. I should have known better.